All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rechak, Wadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who were very well, very beautifully. Double salutations be unto the Akim out here pushing his gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect, scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is Brother Quanah Wath come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. It's like it. Mouth kind of dry, but nonetheless, I was I was scrolling, looking at some articles, man, and I came across this article as you see right here. It says, this is the end time headlines. It says, Trump family says US dollar needs an upgrade to private cryptocurrencies and stablecoins, and they are the ones to do it. And, we had last year, we had something called Crypto Week. And that in that week, there was a few bills, right, that were ultimately passed, right? You had the Stable Act as well as the Genius Act, right, which ultimately allows for the tracking, the tracing, the monitoring, right, all really the same thing, but as well as the data gathering of these different currencies, right, these cryptocurrencies, right, a CBDC, right, which is ultimately being introduced. And now, right, because again, right, as we we've been paying attention, the American dollar, the physical currency, right, the dollar is being devalued, right, as we speak. More and more countries, and we've been saying this time and time again, right, more and more countries are dealing outside the dollar, which is again decreasing the value and the strength of the dollar, right? And people are feeling that, here, in America, right? The average, a consumer is feeling that, right? Especially, with Trump, also putting tariffs on these nations, upping the tariffs, which he put a blanket tariff on all the nations, right? A 10% tariff, and he's trying to up it to 15, even though, right, the Supreme Court, ultimately, took his ability, and I say that with quotations, right, took his ability to, to put those tariffs on these nations away. But we understand that he's acting outside of, the norm, and he's still, he's moving like a king rather than an actual president. So he very well could, put that 15% on all these nations, right? Which is again, right, him putting the tariffs on these nations, even even the American allies, right, like France, Germany, so on and so forth, the European Union, NATO members, right? It's causing them to step away from America and step away from the dollar, and look, right, to different nations and currencies, right, to trade and do business in, right? So as we see all of that, ultimately happening and taking place, we also see that Esau, because at the end of the day, right, we understand that Esau, right, 2 Corinthians 2:11, right, we're not ignorant of Satan's devices, right, ignorant of his evil plots and schemes, right. This is all, a part of his agenda, right. He wants to get rid of this physical currency, right, so that way he can ultimately bring about a currency that he is able to track, to trace, just to control, and in all aspects of the word, right, control, right, because that's what it goes back to, right, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 4, right. He wants to be the Most High, right, and with this physical currency, right, he's not able to track or trace, where you spend your money, how you spend your money, and all that, which is again why he's coming out with this digital version of this physical currency, right, which he is, saying is going to be, the better, upgraded version of the current dollar, right, which we're going to get into, right? In this article, it says, since the dollar was created in 1792, the U.S. presidents and their families have generally been content with the status quo of effectively giving the national government a monopoly on issuing currency and outlawing the use of foreign currencies, right? It says, consider the launch of the dollar, the country's initial coin offering, back when the U.S. government was hustling to surpass the dominance of the Spanish pieces of eight, then in common circulation throughout the country. When presidents have said anything about the dollar itself, it was generally to reiterate the U.S. government's strong dollar policy, right? Because again, right, as the scriptures say, matter of fact, we'll grab it in Jeremiah chapter 51, and verse 7 being the point, right? It says, Babylon had been a golden cup in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai's hand, right? The Lord ultimately utilizing, right, Babylon, right, to be on top and have that, number one currency and be over the rest of these nations, right? The nation that the rest of these nations that are in the world, the rest of the heathens, right, come to, right, to make, to ultimately set up shop and, and again, utilize the dollar, to get rich, to get wealthy, right? It says Babylon had been a golden cup in Yahweh by Hashem Yahushai's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad, right? So let's go back, right? Because again, right, that strong dollar policy, right? Babylon being on top, the currency that Babylon uses being on top, right, which is the American dollar, But see, again, we're seeing all of that, slowing down, right? It says that continued more or less uninterrupted through 46 presidencies until last March, when a company partly owned by President Donald Trump and his family began to market an alternative to the dollar, a cryptocurrency dubbed USDi. And again, right, we have to understand this damn devil is very deceptive, right? Because during Trump's campaign, he was saying that he was against CBDC. He was against, digital currencies and so on and so forth. But here he is, him and his whole family, right, are now pushing for a digital dollar, right, which they're calling USDi, right? It's not official, but this is something that is, again, according to prophecy, right? And, scriptures say that we have a more sure word of prophecy, right? I mean, everything that Yahweh Ba'ashem Shai, ultimately speaks, right, through the mouth of his prophets, every last word comes to pass, and starting with our beloved elder apostles on down, right, to the men that have come up under them, right, preaching this gospel in truth and in sincerity. We've been telling y'all, man, that Esau was going to come with this digital currency, right, and ultimately make it mandatory, right, in order for you to be able to participate in society. And as we read in Habakkuk 2 and 3, right, at the end it shall speak. It's speaking loud and clear, right? You got more and more nations, right, making the digital ID mandatory, right, such as the UK, Mexico, right, the most recent ones, So we're on that track right now, It says on Wednesday, the president's two oldest sons told CNBC on the sidelines of a day-long crypto event they hosted why they think that should change, right? It says the value of the USDi, which is marketed as a stable coin, right? Again, the Stable Act, the Genius Act, right? Go back and look at those acts that were passed. Again, they speak on a stable coin, right? Being able to gather the data, right, of it being shared from platform to platform, them being able to, again, track and trace it, right? This is the whole reason why that these acts were ultimately passed, It's so that when this stable coin gets pushed out there, right, they have full control, right? It says the value of the USDi, which is marketed as a stable coin, would track the dollar, right? There you go, right? We would track the dollar, much as the dollar, when it was created in 1792, was initially pegged to the value of the then dominant Spanish silver dollar. The Trump's company, World Liberty Financial, touts USDi as an improvement on an official U.S. currency. The firm's website brands its stablecoin as the dollar upgraded, and it calls the coin still the U.S. dollar, but for a new era, right? Because we're coming into an NWO, right? A new world order, right? Where everything is digital, right? We're currently under, right, a technocracy, right? When you go into that word technocracy, it ultimately goes into a government being ran, right, by technological experts, you know? And again, right, it's not just, a single government. Now we're under a global technocracy, because this is something that's ultimately going to encompass, it's like they encompass the entire world, right? This NWO, It says on Wednesday, the firm held the World Liberty Forum at Mar-a-Lago, the club owned by the president and operated as his winter White House, right? So this is something that ultimately is being talked about more and more, right? Pushing, a UBI, right? Pushing a digital currency, pushing, the devaluation of this current physical dollar, right? And again, it's all happening as we speak, which again is prophecy being fulfilled, Prophecy is being fulfilled right before our eyes, man, And then I do want to grab that in Habakkuk, since I quoted it. This is Habakkuk chapter 2, and I'll start at verse 1. It says, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. And again, we're watching, right, what's going on, right, the certain things that are being spoken on, right, and how, these different officials and the government is moving, right? Because again, we understand that this is something that, because Esau likes to work in gradualism, right? Meaning one small step at a time, and he also has something called, problem, reaction, solution, right? Or order ab chaos, which means order out of chaos, right? So Esau creates the problem, right? He creates, a situation that is going to invoke the reaction that he is hoping for, right? The people being in a position of desperation, right? Being in a position of need. And then what does he do, right? He comes through and acts like he's the fucking good guy, right? When in reality, he's the bad guy. He's the one that put y'all in the position in the first place, right? What does it say in Sirach, the 12th chapter, right? If adversity come upon thee, thou shalt find him there first. Meaning he gonna be the root cause of whatever you're going through, right? And as far as the American people, right, the financial stress that these people are dealing with, that financial pressure that these people are dealing with, people losing jobs at an all-time high, prices are going up. Who's doing it? Esau, Edom, right? Trump and the administration are the ones that are throwing these tariffs on these nations, causing these nations to step away from the America and the American dollar, putting more pressure on the American people, right? Because these tariffs are not really hurting these nations, because they're finding ways around it. It's hurting the American people, right? Because America is one of the largest, if not the largest, import country in the world, right? America, especially with all these different businesses and whatnot, they set up shop, right? As far as, they're the retail shops and whatnot here in America, but they, when it comes to the making the product and whatnot, right? The manufacturing portion of it, they outsource that, because they can get it penny the labor, right, for pennies on the dollar, but then turn around and sell their product here in America, right, for tens of dollars, versus what they create it for, or make it for, or manufacture it for, So they import that, right? From their own, their own manufacturing warehouses and whatnot. So America imports a lot of their, product and then ultimately sells it, you know, back to those nations. And that's how America gets its money. That's how all these nations get it. They get their money as well, right? Being in bed with America. But see, again, all that's coming to an end, right? And we're watching it happen, right? Habakkuk 2:2, it says, in Yahweh, by Hashem Yahushai said, it says, and Yahweh by Hashem Yahushai answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain upon tables that he may run that readeth it. And again, we're making it plain and easy for you to understand. We're giving you hard evidence and filtering these events and so on and so forth, articles through the scriptures, letting you know this is exactly what Yahweh by Hashem Yahushai said would take place, especially in these times. Prophecy is being fulfilled, as it says in 2 Ezra 15:1. Speak thou in the ears of my people the words of prophecy, for they are faithful and true. And it's happening, right? We have a more sure word of prophecy, right? Verse 3 being the point. It says, for the vision, right, is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. And we're in the time where this prophecy is no longer tarrying, right? But it's ultimately happening before our eyes. Esau, Edom, right, is moving, right? Yahweh Shem Shah is putting the spirit upon this devil, right, to move extremely fast, extremely fast, and we're going to continue to, blow the trumpet, right? Because this is the next major prophecy. Understand, we're in the time of Jacob's trouble, but see, and that's current, right? We're currently in Jacob's trouble right now, but see, it's only going to continue to get worse, right? Until that peak, right? Which the peak of Jacob's trouble, the hour of temptation, is what, right? The mandatory implementation of the RFID micro CHIP, which is going to have all your information on there, right? It's going to have your health records. It's going to have your personal information, right? It's even going to have your digital wallet, meaning you're going to have a digital currency attached to that device, right? And this is their aim. Again, a new upgraded, right? A US dollar upgraded, right? It's like the US dollar, but a new era, right? And that's how they're marketing it. And see, a lot of the people in the world, they're going to fall for that, right? Just as all these new phones, these new cars, and so on and so forth, they come out, the people want the next best thing, right? So Esau got you in the mindset, right? He just ultimately needs to introduce, this new piece of technology that the people are ultimately going to be drooling over, But see, again, right, we see right through his evil plans, his evil purpose, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Shah. We understand that this right here is prophecy. This is Esau Edom trying to set up this NWO in which he will rule forever, right? Which is Revelation, the 13th chapter, right? Yeah, we'll start up, right? It says, the beast from the earth, right? Revelation 13 and verse 11. It says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And again, this is going into, that fourth beast, right? Which is the Roman Empire, right? But see, this is applying to who? It's applying to America, right? Which is Rome 2.0. And we're going to grab it, right? In the next verse, right? But it says what? It says he had two horns like a lamb, which goes back to your, I think it's plebeians and patricians, right? Which is the two parties of the, within the Roman Senate, if you will, right? Which today you have what? The Democrats and the Republicans, right? So it's basically Rome 2.0. And it says he spake as a dragon, going back to that draconian, laws and speech, right? That he ultimately has, right? Strong G 1404. Dracon, right? Hey, that's 144. Call law Yabashimashah. But it says what? It says a dragon, a great serpent, a Satan. I know I had it on here. But ultimately, it goes back to, those harsh laws and policies. I know it goes back to, I can't remember the dude's name, but damn, I can't remember the dude's name. I had it on the tip of my tongue as I was reading this, Salakia. But it ultimately goes back to a man, right, that was known for passing, harsh laws, right? Harsh laws, right? And this is exactly what we're seeing now, you know? But it says, verse 12, it says, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Right? And again, this is speaking about America, right? That Roman Empire ultimately fell, right? But see, it was reincarnated, healed, right, through America, right? That same philosophy, that same, wine, right, that the Roman Empire had and pushed, amongst the known world at the time. America is doing the same thing. You know, matter of fact, let's grab this. I had it pulled up. Second is the 11th chapter. When you go into this chapter, it ultimately goes into the Roman Empire, right? The Pax Romana and whatnot, goes into all the different Roman emperors, right? And you read this, right? Second Esdras 11 and verse 40, it says, and the fourth came, right? That fourth beast being the Roman Empire, right? And the fourth came and overcame all the beasts that were past, and had power over the world with great fearfulness. You see, America, for so long, and even to this very day, right? America is feared by these different nations, right? Most of these nations don't want to go up against America, right? America has the strongest military, in the entire world, right? With all these, I think 11 different, destroyers, right? Which are, they can, one of the destroyers, I think USS Abraham Lincoln, right, can ultimately be out on, in the sea, right, for 20 years and not have to refuel, right? It is the largest aircraft carrier, right, slash destroyer, if you will, right, in the entire world. And America's got 11 of them, right? Where most of these different nations, they got one or two, you know? But it says, and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression. See, the ancient Roman Empire didn't have rule over the entire world, right? But America does, America does. Not, which is, again, Rome 2.0. It says, and in so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit, right? And see, Esau is still in power, right? And he's still deceiving the people. All right, let's go back. Continuing on, Revelations 13 and verse 13. It says, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, right? Which is going back into, those, that the bombs, right? The atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb, so on and so forth. I think the man named Oppenheimer, he said, I've become destroyer of worlds, right? And that goes back to when they, I think it was the Fiji Islands or something like that, where they, or I can't remember exactly where, but they dropped a bomb, and that was the first one, and it was a massive, explosion, man, and now they've created what? They've created ICBM nuclear missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? And that didn't stop there, right? Esau did not stop his technology right then and there. He continued to build, which is what we see today, right? The technology he has today, the power he has through that technology today, right? And now which he is trying to utilize to keep himself in power permanently, right? Continue on verse 14. It says, and deceiveth them, right? There goes back to that deceit, right? And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles, right? Which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. And these miracles are going into, with Elon Musk and his company Neuralink, right? Going and partnering up with these different doctors and hospitals and putting these C-hips in these patients' heads, which are disabled or, in any kind of way, where it could be paralyzed, could be blind, could be, deaf, right? And putting these C-hips in these people, and it's allowing them to see, it's allowing them to feel, it's allowing them to, to walk again, right? These are these miracles in which these people are seeing, right? But we understand that if you take that device out, yeah, that person gonna go right back to being paralyzed. He's gonna go right back to being blind, right back to being deaf, right? Which is again deception, right? But Esau's passing these things off as, again, miracles. You know, you got people that are paralyzed from the neck down, right? You might not be able to get the surgery, right? To with that device to be able to actually make you from your neck down be able to move. But he could put a C-hip in your head, and now you got BCI, right? Brain computer interface. With especially with those glasses, now you can control everything right in your house because everything is going digital. You could turn on your AC, you could turn on your TV just by thinking about it. And now you got people who have no disabilities are starting to get that C-hip as well, right? But again, it's all deception, right? He's not telling you that you taking this is ultimately going to get you killed, right? It says, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Again, going back to that Roman Empire being taken down, but revived through America, right? Rome 2.0, right? Verse 15, it says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, which the image of the beast is not, again, it's not an actual image, right? It's going back to that wine, that philosophy, right, in which he has pushed, America has pushed onto the rest of the world, right, the rest of these nations, that Roman, philosophy, right, lifestyle, if you will, right? It says, and that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed, right? So if you ultimately don't want to be a part of this society, you don't want to be a part of this NWO, well, you're going to be ostracized, man. In which we've seen a portion of that, take place when, 2019, 2020, when the scamdemic ultimately had taken place, right? And that C19 came about, right? You either had to take, or get that JAB, or you're not going to be able to go into the grocery stores, right? We've seen over in France, people weren't taking it, and then you had the officers went wrestling them down, beating them down, blah, 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 because they didn't have, that V passport, man, or they didn't have a JAB, or they didn't have, that green card, and, like they did in Israel, they had a green card, that ultimately stated that you took the JAB. Now you're able to go into the restaurants. Now you're able to go into, basic entertainment like the movies and so on and so forth, But those who didn't were not able to. That was a glimpse, right? That was a trial, a test run of what is about to unfold. Now, instead of just some type of jab that you have to receive, now it's going to be what? It's going to be this RFID micro C-hip, which has this digital currency attached to it, right? Because again, we're seeing that the physical currency is being devalued by the day, right? More and more events are coming out, more and more articles are coming out about nations saying, nah, we ain't finna do this, we ain't finna do that with America. The dollar being devalued, right? The American economy is dropping, right? The GDP, the DOW is all going down. They say it's stabilizing, they say it's, it's good, the economy is good, but in reality it's not. Right? When you go into that word killed, right? Because again, right, you're going to have it to where you're going to have some people, right? Especially those who truly believe in Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. We're not going to take it, man. And it was, sort of the same thing, right? What happened during, again, the scamdemic, which is coming, right? We weren't going to take the JAB, man. Some brothers got laid off, right? Most of us were just having to chill at home, right? It says Strong's G 615 apokteno, which means what? To kill in any way whatsoever, right? Which they weren't doing that, right? They weren't killing the people, during the scamdemic, right? They were ultimately, just again, right, keeping you from participating, right? Which goes into the root word, right? Which is apo, which means what? A separation, right? Of local separation, right? Um, right here, it says of a state of separation that is of distance, right? Physical of distance of place. Um, it was so they had that 6 feet, right? Which the number six, right, shows you, right? Esau is has his hand all through that, right? That number six, right? 6 feet, you know, and so on and so forth, man. But soon it's gonna go deeper than that, right? And this time it's not gonna be just a physical separation. If you don't take this karagma, you mean you're not gonna be able to participate in society. Meaning you're not gonna be able to buy food, you're not gonna be able to buy water, right? Which if Esau doesn't actually physically kill you, you not being able to buy the basic necessities that you need will eventually, you will eventually pine away and die. And this is the time that we're approaching, you know? As it says right here, Revelations 13 and verse 16, it says, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, right? Which you got the RFID, the little rice grain that goes in your hand, or the actual C hip that goes in your head, right? And it doesn't matter, you can get the shit on fucking your elbow. You still received it. It doesn't matter exactly where you got it. If you receive it, you receive it. Period, point blank, right? But see, again, you're gonna need that in order to, continue, with your everyday lives in the near future, right? Verse 17, it says, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name, right? So you're not going to be able to, operate, right? And again, they're talking about this new dollar, right? It's a digital form of the current dollar, the USDi. This is what's coming, man. We've been telling y'all for years, this is what is being spoken about openly now, right? By Esau Edom. See that people were saying that the elder apostles were on down, that we're crazy, that this isn't gonna happen, the American dollar is still in power, so on and so forth. Hey, but see, the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai is having those proverbs to cease, because prophecy is coming to pass. These are the times that we are currently in, man. It says, here is the wisdom, here is wisdom. Let him that hath go out there, please. Go. It says, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 600 threescore and 6. There it goes. That's 666, right? Going back to the scamdemic, that 6 feet. Well, when you look at these barcodes, right, and you do the research and you go into these barcodes naturally have that number 6 within them, man. And you're going to have your own barcode, right, via the RFID micro C hit, man. This is happening, man. Right before our eyes, man. Call Lord Yahweh Shem Shai. Really, the message, right, is for those that truly believe in Yahweh Shem Shai, don't take it. Continue to trust and believe in Yahweh Shem Shai at all times, man. Oh, let me grab it. Let me grab this. Kind of came to mind. Right. These are fire, man. I'm going to read these three, man. Yeah, Psalms 34 and 22, it says, Yahweh B'Hashem Al-Shah redeemeth the soul of his servants, and none of them that trust in him shall be desolate, right? So, because the time's going to come when we're not going to be, we're not going to take the charagma, right? And we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to buy, we're not going to be able to sell. But see, Yahweh B'Hashem Al-Shah is going to, ultimately sustain us, man. As you read it, 2 Ezra, the second chapter. Matter of fact, let's grab that real quick. Boom. 2 Ezra 2 and 27. It says, be not weary, for when the day of trouble and heaviness cometh, others shall weep and be sorrowful, but thou shalt be merry and have abundance. The Lord's going to make sure we eat in that day, right? The Lord's going to make sure we drink. Isaiah, the 65th chapter, verse 13, on down, 13 and 14, right? Isaiah 33 and verse 15 to 16, right? His bread shall be sure, right? Water shall be given him, right? It's talking about the elect, man, right? Those who truly trust and believe in Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. Let's grab this. Psalms 119 and verse 42. It says, so shall I have wherewith to answer him. It's like a... So shall I have wherewith to answer him that reproacheth me, for I trust in thy word. Verse 30, Proverbs 30 and 5. It says, every word of the Most High is pure. He is a shield unto them that put their trust in him. Right? A shield, right? Protection. A beautiful chapter to read. And, as far as Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua being that shield and that buckler, it's Psalms the 91st chapter, man. Right? As long as we continue to trust and believe in Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua in the times of coming, the Lord got our back, man. At all times. Matter of fact, there's a precept, Psalms 34. And I think it's... This whole chapter is fire, right? But I'll start this. This is Psalm 34 and verse 14. It says, depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. And how do we do that? Right? By seeking Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, right? Through his prophets, right? Watching the videos, reading the scriptures, right? Getting built up, built up in this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, built up in our faith, right? It says, the eyes of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto their cry. The face of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua is against them that do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth, right? And we understand that Esau, Edom is the wicked, right? He is the evil, right? But we understand 2/3 of our people, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right, want to follow this damn devil, right? Thus, you're going to ultimately receive, the same judgment, right? Being destroyed by ICBM nuclear missiles here in America, which we don't want, right? We don't want to receive the same judgment as the man that's been oppressing us for, hundreds of years, we want him to get that judgment, right? It says, the righteous cry, and Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua heareth and delivereth them out of all their troubles, man. Right? And again, that's talking about the elect, the righteous, right? Which Lord will we be of that number, right? When time comes, we're going to call upon Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, the true name of the Heavenly Father being Yahweh, and his only beloved begotten Son, who the world ignorantly called Jesus Christ. His true name is Yahweh Shah. We're going to call upon those names. And guess what? Lord, will we be of the elect? We're going to be delivered, man. And however that, however that looks, however it happens, right? It's going to be a miracle nonetheless, right? It says, Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua delivereth him out of all of them. It says, he keepeth all his bones, not one of them is broken. Evil shall slay the wicked, and they that hate the righteous shall be desolate. Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua redeemeth the soul of his servants, and none of them that trust in him shall be desolate, man. So continue to trust and believe in Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, man. When all this happens and Esau makes it mandatory, we ain't got nothing to worry about, man. Right? Because ultimately Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, he's the one that's in control, right? He's the one that's allowing this damn devil to move the way he's moving, right? So we should know that Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua is not going to allow him, to overcome the righteous, right? Continue to trust in Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua all the way to the end. But that's all I got, man. Lord wills, edifying, Lord will, straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, glory to Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, B'Hashem, Rechak Kodash, double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.